Hi, everybody. It's Pasha Kane from Raise the Bar in Real Estate. And I am just over the moon to introduce to you our next guest, Cynthia Villamor from Inspired Spaces. She is the owner and senior designer at this staging company, but she has this wealth of industry knowledge and experience that I'm really excited for all of you to get to hear. Cindy's been in the business for over 20 years. She has worked in the Seattle area, Texas, and various projects around the Pacific Northwest, and made her way up to Oregon, where she started Inspired Spaces in 2016 out of her garage. We always love those stories of
Yeah.
people starting out of their garage and then hit it big. Her business now is just shy of $1 billion in 2024. So that is remarkable. What a success story. She's been featured in AM Northwest in 2024, The American Dream, and named the top staging company by Redfin. Congratulations, Cindy. Wow, what a
Thank you.
pedigree. Way to make your mark in Portland. And we've worked together. Your staging is outstanding. And every time you go into one of your staged homes, it really creates emotional connection. It's so beautiful and really tells a story. And that's why I really enjoy working with you and what you do for homes. So
Thank you.
so welcome. So can you maybe just tell us a little bit, how did you get interested in staging and into the real estate industry?
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And we love working with you and enjoy, the camaraderie that we have with you. So thank you for the opportunity. I have been doing, this for almost 20 years, back when staging was really just getting started. And I was doing a lot of design work at the time, doing a lot of homes, and staging was just kind of um, getting its way into real estate. And I would say early on, it was just here and there that I was doing staging, but I was working on friends' homes and even some small commercial projects when my husband kept saying, "Man, you got to stop doing this for free because clearly there's something here and you should probably launch into it." So I went, took additional classes and started to get my feet wet. And along the way, I discovered that I really enjoyed the last part of a design project, which really is the staging portion. That was my favorite part. And so when I came to Portland and I started to meet a couple of realtors, the staging portion of my business just took off. And I thought, wow, well, what a perfect fit because this is the best part of the project anyway. So it kind of took off organically. And like I said, I was working out of my garage because I was starting my business completely over again after being in a couple different areas. And it kind of took off organically. We would put a little sign in the homes that said this home staged by Inspired Spaces. And we just started getting calls. But early on, everything was out of my garage or out of my own house. And my kids can tell you stories about how they would come home and the lamps out of their bedroom were gone and the dining room was gone one time because, I didn't have the inventory to do it. And so I was piecing it together however I could. I was reupholstering furniture on my weekend so that I had it ready for the following week. So I built it with blood, sweat, and tears. And it is a blessing to me. And I am humbled that now we have inventory for over 200 homes. And so, have a warehouse. Nothing fits in my garage anymore, and I enjoy what I do.
Wow, wow. You hit on something that I was thinking about is because years ago it wasn't that common to see houses staged. When do you feel that it has become more mainstream and popular? And what was that kind of shift in tide?
Mm-hmm. So 20 years ago, when you were staging a home, the projects looked very different because there were no real good pricing strategies at the time. So back then, a lot of times, if I did a home, it might be for a builder. And
Mhm.
that project would be very expensive because most of the time they were purchasing all the inventory that we were putting in that house. So a project back then might be $15,000 or $20,000. And then that same project today might be 2,500 because now we have these different strategies that we've come up with that work a lot better. But I feel like back then it was really only builders and maybe higher end homes that were using staging. But about the time 2007, 2008, when we started to have a lot of problems in the housing industry, that's when you really started to see all of those shifts where we were coming up with better strategies on how to stage homes at every price point. And it was starting to make sense to people. HGTV, DIY channel, all those things were starting to feature staging a bit more often. And it became very apparent that those homes were just showing a lot better. I remember clear back 20 years ago doing a home in a subdivision, and all the homes were basically identical, just same square footage, everything. And we staged a home there that ended up getting 15,000 more than all the other homes. But they were the same home. It was the same layout, same finishes, everything. And that's back when the price point was 185. So $15,000 was a pretty big, substantial bump up in the price because of the way that home was showing. So I would say 2007, 2008, people began to realize that this thing called staging really did work. And it was a great way to help recoup and get top dollar for your home in a far more difficult market. So.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, you're right. I think those shows and just the market definitely had an impact.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you started, really honing your design philosophy. Can you talk a little bit about what is your personal design philosophy compared to other stagers and how you differentiate yourself?
Yeah. Well, one, I try to bring in that design experience and the fact that I grew up in a DIY family where we were doing everything. I would into the middle of the night around the home, and that's the way that I grew up. So when I walk into a house, I'm looking at it both from the perspective of a buyer, but I'm also looking at that home as if, okay, if I lived in this home, what would be the cost effective things that I would do for this home to bring it top dollar? Because there are some great tricks that you can do at any price point to help sophisticate the look, to help bump it up a little bit. So when I walk through, I want to have two different sets of eyes. I'm looking at it like a buyer, but I'm also saying, what could I do to help elevate this home? And so we try to bring that to every single price point. Yeah, the budget's different, but there are still some key things that are going to help that home show better, and it's going to get more foot traffic through the door. So we're looking at the finishes, we're looking at the color palette, we're looking at the architecture. Those things, we're going to take all those things into account, and then we're going to come up with a design plan from there.
Wow. Wow. So you're really having to appeal to a lot of different buyers and a broader audience.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit, how do you do that? I mean, people's tastes are so different and the way they connect to, home. How do you really get a broad appeal and still making the house feel warm and elevated?
Yes. So to give a broad appeal, one of the things I like to mention if I'm doing a consultation is that at any given time, we're only going to appeal to about 80% of the market. There's always going to be about 20% that don't necessarily like what we do, no matter what, because you really just can't hit every box on every single home. But if we can appeal to that 80%, then we're getting through the door. Now, we don't want it to be sterile, and we want it to be very warm and inviting. So part of how we're going to do that every time, we take those three things: color palette, we're going to be looking at the finished texture to make sure that the plan fits the home. So you don't want to be forcing a mid-century modern into a Victorian, that kind of a thing. So it can't just be based on what's trending. It also has to fit the home, otherwise it looks forced. So we're going to look at all those things. We're going to come up with that design plan. And then let's just say it is very modern. Well, the most modern look really does still appeal to a smaller audience. So we have to warm that up a little bit. A lot of times the tricks that I use are details, accessorizing, bringing in pieces like greenery and pillows, row a little bit cozier. And so we'll pull those things in. And a lot of times we'll stand back and say, okay, it needs warmed up a little bit, or actually we went too far and it doesn't feel modern enough anymore. So we're going to pull back a little bit. But those details, the accessorizing, and I love my whole team, I think is just amazing at accessorizing. Those that I think that is one of our fortes is accessorizing. Those really help to make those emotional connections. You see that cute little setup in a primary bedroom next to the fireplace that makes you go, man, I want to sit there. I would love to wake up that way every single day and sit in that chair. You know, we're trying to create those sweet little moments all through the home that are going to create those emotional connections. And a lot of times that has to do with the details. So
yeah, you hit on something that I think we probably take for granted is just the planning and the runway, the thought that goes into curating that a look. Can you talk to us a little bit about your process and the pre-planning and before you even start, getting the furniture in the house as an accessorizing?
Yeah. Well, I have a big team. And so there are 5 other people on the design team and then a large tech team. And it would be fun for people to see what we do every single morning as we're preparing to get our trucks out the door. But it all starts with that initial either walkthrough or we receive pictures and we're looking at, everything and putting that together. We'll determine what style we think should go in the home and the color palette again. Price point. We're looking at the price point and at the scale and proportion of the pieces that need to go in. So we're going to look at all those things and we're going to create a little design plan and a client file. Then that client file goes into our schedule so that the morning that we're actually pulling all those pieces, I do a little powwow with the design team every single time right before we pull everything. And I'll say, okay, this home, here's the price point, here's the style. We're going to do a cool scheme or a warm scheme. We're going to be putting in pops of black. Here's the price point. Here's the scale of the furniture that I'm going to be using. And I give them just a little overall rundown. From there, then I go through and I choose all the furniture for that home, and they take the information I've given them to start pulling the accessories for the home. And we kind of converge in our accessory area. And I do a look through to make sure that we've all kind of got a good copacetic look for the home. And then it's getting loaded into the truck. But we have it down to a really good little formula that works really well. The whole design team has access to the file, so they can be looking at it as they're pulling. And we'll pull 3 to 5 homes per day as we're going out and staging, especially between now and September. 3 to 5 is about average. So
3 to 5 stages a day.
Yeah.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah. It's often.
Yeah. I mean, God, the orchestration of all of that. And you touched on like the differences between different price points. Like, do you approach like luxury homes different than starter homes? And even like you mentioned mid-century, you have a different approach. Like, how do you make sure it doesn't just become a homogenized approach?
Yeah. Yeah, so we in our warehouse, we actually have certain furniture that is for the higher end homes.
Okay.
And what that typically means is it's probably larger in scale for one, because if we're doing a 4,000 square foot home, it just requires different proportions than an 1,800 square foot home. So
Mhm.
the proportions are usually a little bit larger. Um, Oftentimes, those do have a little bit more of a high end look to them. It just, again, you just can't put the same couch in 1,800 square feet that you can put in 4,000. So we have things that are specifically purchased for the high-end homes. Um, so with that, the formula stays kind of the same, but the pieces change so that they are the higher end pieces, but it still fits into kind of the formula that we have for each home.
Got
Uh,
it.
but even the accessories, the scale changes because you've got these fireplaces that might go up 20 feet. So now the artwork also gets larger. The vases that go up there are going to be much larger. So the proportion, the scale, the elevated pieces, we have pieces that are dedicated to those larger high-end homes. So,
Yeah, you can totally visualize that.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
What do you do when the seller is still in the home? Do you create like can you work with their furniture? Do you have a hybrid model?
We do have a hybrid model. And for us, and not every staging company does it this way, but when we are doing a home that's going to be occupied, we require a walkthrough.
Hmm.
During that walkthrough, we're going to, do a lot of education about the entire selling staging process, because that can be a difficult thing for a seller, because they feel very attached to their own things.
Yeah.
And when you say you're going to be replacing those,
Hmm.
that can be a hard conversation. So we do a lot of explaining, what's trending, what is going to get feet through the door, how do we turn your home into a product. So we talk a lot about that, and then we go through and make a room by room plan for the home. And that all is turned into a report that we send to them within 48 hours, usually 24. But we send them a report, and it's going to have things like whether they should paint, whether there should be new light fixtures that are put into the home. It'll have links to those things, and even flooring if they need it. Now, if they don't want to go quite that far, although I think lighting and paint are huge to helping change the perception of a home, we're still going to have a keep list of what they should keep in each room and what should be removed, and then what we're going to bring in to supplement what they have. And so we create that little room by room plan. They can follow that, and then we come back and we implement the plan on staging day.
Interesting. Oh, which is this brings me to a question of like, are you ever involved in maybe some of the light renovation? Because as realtors, sometimes we'll say, hey, if you change this paint color, if you add a new fixture, are you pulled in that early by any chance for as a design consultant?
Yes.
Oh,
And I think that's like one of the things that is really unique to our company is that my team is trained on color, and also we'll provide light fixture links and the appropriate height to actually put those at when they're installed. But we do have some of the realtors call us right away when they know there are some changes that need to be made. We'll walk through. There's a fee, of course, attached to all that information, but we'll go through and we'll create a little design plan so that they have that, and they have it from an educated to those suggestions.
oh wow, wow. Now you got me thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah, because it just feels like that would just make it more holistic and cohesive if you were brought in, if some of those changes needed to be made.
Yeah.
So,
100%. Yeah.
um, so I'm sold on staging, but still, I think there is a percentage of the population and maybe sellers who haven't sold in a while who might be a little skeptical. What would you say are the biggest advantages in staging right now? And
Yeah,
speak to it in both like quantitative, qualitative. What do you
yeah.
see return on investment? Why do you recommend staging?
Yeah. So we have a couple decades now of statistics that we can look back at. We have a lot of good information. A staged home typically sells 2 to 3 times faster.
Oh,
And
wow.
we saw that last year, the market time was ranging from 35 days up to about 89 days. Our average time on market was 19. So that proves out that timeline that it really does help the home to sell a lot more quickly. On top of that, typically you're going to see about a 5 to 6% higher sales price when the home has been staged. So let's just say we're looking at a $600,000 home, 5 or 6% higher sales price. We're looking $30 to $36,000 difference. So when you're making a few $1,000 investment in your staging, that's paying off usually about 10 times over. Now, on the low side, I can find statistics out there that say anywhere from 3 to 20%. And we have seen 20 and even 30%, $300,000 over asking. But I think in a reasonable, more balanced market, that 5 to 6% is that's a more accurate number. I think when people throw out 20%, they're looking at the hottest markets, and it's probably not the best statistic to use, but 5 to 6, I see that all the time. So I think that's a very fair number to throw out there. As far as other reasons why it's important, I would say the appeal. It just makes the home, when you look at the pictures of a staged home, the home is far more dialed in. And
Mhm.
what that does is it gets more feet through the door.
Yeah.
And realtors know on average, if they can get more feet through the door, that translates into more offers. So getting the home dialed in is really what staging is about. Like my team knows how to angle everything for the photographs, how to angle. They're looking at the way that a person would tour the home, and we're actually setting up our arrangements so that it appeals to that person as they're walking through the home. So every little thing, we have been trained to create those picture perfect moments as they do their walkthrough. So there's a lot of psychology behind the staging, but those emotional connections are just as important as it sells 2 to 3 times faster, because it's a rational decision, logical, but it's also emotional. And staging really helps to pull that emotional part in. People don't just buy a home because it had 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. They had to kind of feel something
Yeah.
like, okay, this felt like home. I could see myself there. Those are the phrases that we're trying to create. So,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's so true. It is. It's truly a emotional connection when a stage is home properly.
mhm.
What are some of the mistakes you see with staging that maybe kind of misses that art and science that you're talking about?
Yeah. Um, well, I see this a lot from people trying to do it themselves, or maybe it's a realtor that's just trying to help out their clients.
Yeah.
Using oversized pieces, not having the right proportion of furniture in the home, because it does two things. It can make the space either look far too small, or it can make it look cavernous, like you've got toy furniture sitting in there.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
you want to have the right proportion. And then the other thing I see all the time is overly personalized spaces and decisions, where, the thing that got handed down to you from grandma that means a lot to you, it just doesn't translate into something that helps sell your home.
Mhm.
Yes, it's beautiful and it has a lot of sentimental value, but those overly personalized spaces really do make a person feel like they're invading your space, and
Yeah.
they're like, not theirs.
Yeah.
So pulling all those out in order to make it just have a lot more appeal, I think that's huge. And then I can't overestimate the value of painting. Painting your home so that you're starting with a neutral palette. I think that really helps the entire look so much. People think, well, somebody's going to come in, they're just going to change it anyway. Well, that's actually not true. If you start with a neutral palette for your buyers, most of the time they're going to be pretty happy with that. And if they want to make a change, there's nothing imminent that needs to happen because they already at least have a neutral palette. But if you leave them with, circus colors all through that house,
Yeah.
that is giving them a project right out of the gate. And I think that is a big mistake. I personally see a lot of homes sit that have colors going all through the home as opposed to neutralizing the palette.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That is such a good way. You're giving them work before they even moved in.
Yeah, yeah,
Putting a barrier almost,
exactly.
You're creating something that says I'm giving them a reason potentially
Yeah,
not to buy it.
yeah.
Um, so if a seller's on a tight budget, what are some of those must-do staging elements would you recommend?
Okay, so if you're on a tight budget, never forget the entryway. You
Mm,
have 10 seconds to hook a buyer. They make a decision in 10 seconds as to whether they're interested or not interested. So never forget your entryway to make it a wow factor. The living room, the dining room, and the primary, you'll see, like when you work with us, we always recommend that you do those three areas. Any of your high profile rooms where the person who writes the mortgage is going to be spending their time, those are the most important rooms. You
uh,
can get away with some of the extra bedrooms and some of those peripheral spaces not being staged, but those high profile living, family room, the primary bedroom, whoever writes the mortgage check is going to be spending all their time there. You want those rooms to be staged. So,
that's great advice. That is so true. You've got to have a story that sticks out, right? I mean, can you have a memorable staging example that you can share? It could be whether it was the biggest ROI or just one of your best experiences. Do you have
yeah.
some?
Well, the biggest ROI was just a couple years ago, but it was after the interest rates had already climbed up to 7. And it was a home that was listed right at $1 million. And there were quite a number of rooms in the home that were not updated. And in fact, the kitchen wasn't fully updated. So there were quite a few things that were kind of pulling that home back. And the realtor, when I did the walkthrough, she said, I need you to trick the eye into making this home feel like it's updated. And I said, yeah, we can do that. And in this particular instance, a mid-century modern with a little bit of Northwest contemporary was the direction we went with it. They ended up getting $300,000 over the asking price, and it was either 12 or 13 offers.
Oh my,
That I thought, if you had walked through the home vacant, no one would have paid that price. If you had walked through it with the seller's furnishings, they would not have paid that price. But the furnishings and the staging really created this whole new perception of the home. And so I would say that's a good one.
wow, wow. That is so, it's true though. I mean, I think that just sums up the value of staging that story. So
Good, good.
oh, this has been so great, Cynthia. I really appreciate it. I am definitely gonna go back and listen to this again because there's so much value in it. I've just been taking notes, so thank you for
Awesome.
your time. I just want to
Thank
ask you
you.
one last question, though. Just the personal question. What, and I always ask every guest this, if there was something you could tell your younger self, some, words of wisdom, advice, what would it be?
I I love that I made my way into one of my passions, but I think it is important um, to find something you're passionate about. The whole, if you find something you love, you never work a day of your life. I think that's so true. And, I made it my way into it, but I think finding that early on, man, that is a huge blessing if you can make your way to your passion.
Oh, that's such great advice. And it shows. I think when you are passionate about something, it really truly comes to life and, just it's living your authenticity.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully it's infectious.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Where you're so talented and you've been so gracious to come on and talk to us today. So thank you so much. And I hope to have you
Appreciate
back
it.
again. And I look to having some more projects together.
Thank you. Appreciate you so much. Anytime.